We'll start with the prayers. Om Sada Shiva Samarambham
Samaram
Shankaracharya
Shankaracharya
Asmadacharya
Madhyamam
Pariyantam
Vande
Guru
Guru
Paramparam
Paramparam
Om
Om
Sahana
Sahana
Bhavatu
Bhavatu
Sahana
Sahana
Bhunaktu
Virya
Tejasvinavadhinamu
Tejasvinam
Vavai Om Shanti
Shanti.
That's it. Om Namah Shivaya. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so we are on the verse number 9, which is, I think, the last verse. We have done the other 8 verses. So let us chant them. Please unmute yourself. After the chant is over, please mute yourself so that there's no disturbance. Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutaha
Yam
Brahma
Varunendra
Rudra
Kunvanti Divyai Sthavaihi
Vasvanti
Vedai Sangha Padakramopi Nashadai Ayanti Yam Samagaha Dhanavastita Tadgatena Manasa Pasyanti Yam Yoginaha Yasyantam Navidusura Suragana Devaya Tasmai Namaha
Devaya Namaha
Devaya Tasmai Namaha
Devaya Namaha
Devaya Tasmai Namaha
Devaya Namaha.
Okay, so I have muted all of y'all, and please don't unmute yourself excepting when you want to say something. So, look at the last line. Devaya Tasmai Namaha. To that Deva, to that Ishvara, to that Lord, I give my salutations, I give my prostrations, I give my namaskara. So Deva is the God, the Lord. And what type of Lord? That also he says. Yam Stunvanti. That Ishvara, that Lord, who is worshipped. By whom? By people like Brahma, Varuna, Indra, Marutaha, all names of various deities described in the scriptures. And of all these deities, Brahmaji, we call it, Brahmaji is the greatest one. Why? Because he is Jagat Karta, he is Jagat Srishti Karta, he is the creator of this world. And he says, even that Brahma, the greatest of all Brahma, he is worshipping you, hey Vishnu. Okay. Then, how do they worship you? Stunvanti. So, Stunvanti is from Stuti. Stuti is glorification. They all glorify. They all sing the glories. How do they sing? Divyaihi sthavai. Divyaihi. So, why do you pronounce that Divyaihi? Because anybody knows why is it pronounced Divyaihi and not Divyai? So, a few pointers here. The first matra is ye, the second matra makes it yai. I ka matra hai wo. And therefore, when the visarga is there, the two dots, the visarga is there, the visarga always takes the sound of the last syllable. And last syllable is E. The second one is E. Therefore, divyai He. Divyai He. Divyai He. It'll be Divyai He Sthavai. And what is that? Sthavai is stuti, stotrams, divine prayers, sacred prayers. Divya is sacred or divine. And therefore, Divya is Sthavai means sacred hymns, sacred prayers, all laid down in the Vedas. And Gayanti, they sing also. And he qualifies that by saying Samagaha. So Samagaha, Sama refers to Samaveda. Samagaha means the chanters, the singers who sing the Samaveda. Gaha, the chanter or the singer. Okay, so and Samaveda. Why Samaveda? Because Samaveda is supposed to be very musical in composition. And while the other Vedas can only be chanted, the Samaveda can be sung. It's set to meter. It is Chanda predominant, set to meter, and therefore it can be sung. So Samagaha. And therefore all these people, all these gods and all the people in the world, they sing the glory of the Lord. And he says Vedaihi, the plural. It's not just one Veda, all the four Vedas. And how is it? Sangha, Pada, Krama, Upanishadaihi. Okay, so Sa Anga. That has to be taken as Sa Anga, which means with Angas. What are you talking about? Vedaihi, Sa Angaha. The four Vedas plus all its Angas. Angas means parts. So Anga, there is a Veda and there's something called a Veda Anga. So it's very many satellite scriptures. So Veda Anga means, and there are 6 Angas are there. Shiksha, Kalpa, Vyakaranam, Niruktam, Chandaha and Jyotisham. These are called Vedangani. Angani meaning the plural.
Please repeat the 6 Angas of Ved, Acharya ji.
Shiksha, Kalpa, Akalpaha, Vyakaran, Niruktam, Chandaha and Jyotisham. So you must be familiar with most of them. Shiksha, of course, is the art of pronunciation. Kalpaha deals with rituals. Vyakaran is grammar. Niruktam is etymology, how to derive a particular word. Chandaha, Chanda is dealing with the meter. What kind of meter is there? What kind of structure is there? And Jyotisham, of course, is astrology. Okay, so these are all the various Angas. So he's saying that not only these people worship you by singing the Vedas, they also worship you with chanting the Angas also. Remember, all these Angas can be chanted. And Padakramaha. Padakramaha is something which you guys may not be familiar with. Is anybody familiar with what is meant by Pada and Krama? It is an integral part of our scripture.
In proper sequence, maybe?
No. Okay, so let me tell you. These different, our ancestors, or rather who have been chanting the Vedas, there are different types of chanting. For example, I will take the first line of this Dhyanam, Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam. And then we can look at this. So there is called one is called Pada chanting. So Pada chanting means it's a form of chanting where you don't say Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam. Each word, each Pada, that's what it means, Pada. Each word is chanted separately like a sentence. So Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam. So each word is to be taken as a sentence. That is Pada chanting. Then there's something called Krama. So Krama means sequence, of course. But what is the significance of the word sequence in chanting? It means that you join 2 words. So you will take the first word and join with the second word. Then when chanting again, you will continue with second word and join with third word. Then when continuing, you will take third word and join with fourth word. So like this. Om Parthaya Parthaya pratibodhitam bhagavata Narayanena Swayam. You know, if you guys have ever heard Vedic chanting, you will recognize this. The words are being repeated. So this is called krama. Krama pada. First one is pada. This is krama pada. Then there is jatha pada. It's a more difficult one. And where you will take the first word, join with second word. Then reverse the order. You will take second word, join with first word. Then you will take second word, join with third word. Then you will take third word and join with second word. So it becomes more and more difficult. So here it is Om Parthaya, Parthaya Om, Parthaya Pratibodhitam, Pratibodhitam Parthaya. Are you able to see the difference? The words are being chanted in a specific order, and what is most beautiful about all this is we have got the book in front of us, right? But the traditional chanters, for them, having the book in front of you is a dosha, it's a defect. So if you see chanting going on anywhere, there will be no textbooks. Everything is in memory. And then there is one called Ghanapatha. The Ghanapatha is an extremely difficult one. So I'll try to send you one, recording if I can find of Ghanapatha. But here it goes something like this. Om Parthaya, Parthaya Om. Then Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam, Pratibodhitam Parthaya Om. So 1 2 2 1, 1 2 3 3 2 1, 1 2 3 2 3 2 2 3 2 3. Like that it goes. So very difficult, and it's a strain on your memory, right? So all this was used for you to develop your memory and your skill in chanting, and all these different types of chanting are used for glorification of the Lord. And therefore he says, Yoginaha yam pasyanti. The great jnanis, the great meditators, yam pasyanti. Yam is the Ishvara. They see the Lord. Where manasa, in their mind, how, in what state, tad gatena. When the mind is concentrated on the Lord, they see the Lord. So with the help of that tad gatena, which is ekagraha manasa, one-pointed mind, the yogis visualize or perceive the Lord not outside, within themselves. And therefore he says, Dhyana avasthitaha. Dhyana avasthitaha. In the state of meditation, when they are sitting in meditation, yogis perceive the Lord inside. So he's distinguishing. These devotees, they see the Lord outside, but the yogis see the Lord inside. And what kind of Lord? Yasya antam na viduhu. So viduhu means to know. Yasya means of that Lord. Antam means the end. So they don't see the end of the Lord. Means they are not able to appreciate the Lord in person, because Lord is infinite. Infinite can never be seen, either the beginning or the end. Yasyantam na viduhu. They don't see the end. Who don't see? Sura, Asuraha, Ganaha. That word has to be broken up properly. Suras, the Devatas, Asuras, the non-Devatas, or the, Rakshasas, etc. And Ganaha are a different set of residents of Swarga. So all these are residents of Swarga or Naraka. So even these people, these divine beings, they don't see your real form. They are not able to appreciate that there is no beginning and end to you. So remember that if the Lord is a person, what is the problem? Person is limited by space and time. Space limitation means the boundary of the body is there. Time limitations mean there is a beginning and there is an end. There's a birth and there's a death. And this Lord we're talking about is beyond this. And therefore, even the Asuras and Ganas, the gods, Devatas, Asuras, na viduhu, they do not know. Yasya antam. Their space-wise limits of yours, they are not able to comprehend. The time-wise limits of the Lord, they are not able to comprehend. So even Devas and Asuras do not know. Why do they not know? So it has to be understood as there are no limits. When there are no limits, how can you know the limits? But they think there is a limit, and they think that we don't know. But the fact is there is no limit. Then what about the Bhagavan that you see in the Puranas? Bhagavan appearing before somebody, giving darshan and all that. So we have to understand that Bhagavan has two forms. One is a limited form, having a body. Usually you will see that in the Puranas as a human form. And this is temporarily taken by Ishvara for the sake of the devotee, for the sake of giving darshan. And there is a limitless form which is like space, all pervading. In that space itself, the whole universe exists. In that Bhagavan itself, the whole universe exists. So once you get that idea into your head, you know what sort of Bhagavan we're talking about. And all these details we will see more in the Gita as we go on. And Krishna himself will say somewhere that everybody thinks that I am, this 6'3" guy located in Gurukulam or in Gokulam or someplace. And he says they're all fools, because my body is only the human body that you are seeing. I'm the avatar. The real I am all pervading. And to that all pervading Lord, I offer my namaskar. So this is the meaning of the 9th verse. Any questions here?
So I have a question.
Yes, please.
So here it's categorically mentioning that Vishnu is being worshipped. We are not talking about the Avtara form. We are talking about Vishnu. So the Vishnu is being worshipped by Brahmaji.
Yes.
So we are basically I'm little confused about this form. So basically we are saying that there is a Vishnu and there is a Brahma and they are separate. And
We are not saying anything like that. We are saying this for you to focus your mind on. Okay. Remember that the journey is from form to formless. You can't hope to reach the formless without going through the form. And so beginning when he starts, it's always form. And here it is stuti. It is glorification. Why is he saying Vishnu? Tell me.
why is he saying Vishnu?
Why is he saying Vishnu is worshipped by everybody?
Because Krishna is avatar of Vishnu.
Yes. This is the Gita Dhyanam. The Dhyanam is for Gita. So
Mm.
remember that whichever text you are seeing, in that text, the person the God who is being mentioned, he will be glorified as Brahman. So here, Krishna or Vishnu is being glorified as Brahman. Supposing you take Shiva Purana, who is being glorified as Brahman, Shiva will be glorified. If you take Devi Puranam, Devi is glorified. That is the understanding. So don't get stuck in the forms. You have to remember that every form is Brahman alone. That is what is being meant. And since here we are talking about Gita, Bhagavad Gita, and Krishna is the giver of the Gita, Krishna avatar of Vishnu, and therefore Vishnu is being glorified. But remember, what is the derivation of Vishnu? The derivation is from Vishnoti Sarvam, that which encompasses everything. Vishnoti means pervades, that which pervades everything. That is Vishnu. All pervading through and through the whole universe. In fact, the universe existing in that Vishnu.
So, but so I understand that, but like even Shiva is all pervading. Like if there's a Shiva glorifying
Yes, when you
text,
glorify Shiva, he'll be all pervading.
yeah. So what I'm trying to ask is that is there actually like in any loka is there actually these different forms who are existing?
Now, how does it matter?
Okay.
You have to remember that basically what are we talking about? We are talking about the formless Ishvara at one point of time. But when you are starting, the start has to be what?
With form.
The start has to be with form only. Okay, and therefore, one should not get stuck in this form and formless at this stage. All those discussions will come much, much later. Will come much right now. Remember that you're all beginners. There should be no trouble in your mind if you have looking at form. If there is trouble in your mind, it means that you are trying to get to a stage where not prepared. And therefore, right now, one should look only at the form. Beginning stages, we always look only at form. There's a tendency for most intellectuals to disregard form and look at formless. That is not correct, because the formless cannot be seen. The formless has to be understood. And for understanding, you have to have a lot of practice. That is why 80% of Veda consists of Purva Veda, where the important thing is Saguna Ishvara. It is only in Veda Anta that the formless Nirguna Ishvara comes into the picture. Purva Veda is meant for preparing our mind. Then only can we come to Nirguna Ishvara.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else has any questions?
So this Nirgun, as you said, okay, we'll be able to understand later on. But can it be taken as a consciousness all pervading?
Nirguna Ishvara is all pervading consciousness.
Okay, thanks.
There is no other Nirguna Ishvara.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. So we have finished Gita Dhyanam, but I don't want to start with the Gita today. So couple of topics which actually one of you all asked. Because when we discussed the prayers in the beginning, somebody said, I wanted to know the meaning of Om Purnamadam also. Now, normally, I don't, give this meaning for a particular reason. That this is the Shanti Mantra. Shanti Mantra is found in the Vedas. The other prayers we do because they're pretty simple. But Purnamada is one of the Shanti Mantras that is very complex. In fact, this particular two lines, it is able to give you the gist of the entire Bhagavad Gita, of all the Upanishads also. And so it's a bit difficult. But anyway, since you have asked. So you'll have to listen very carefully, and you may find that, sometimes you may not be able to understand what I'm saying, because normally this, as I said, this comes at a stage when there's a certain amount of background. So if you have any questions or anything is not understood, please ask immediately. Okay. So firstly, this is called a Shanti Patha. Shanti Patha means an invocation for asking for Shanti. Okay. It belongs to a Veda called the Shukla Yajurveda. Shukla Yajurveda. Yajurveda has two parts, Shukla Yajurveda and Krishna Yajurveda. Shukla meaning the bright one, Krishna meaning the dark one. This belongs to Shukla Yajurveda. This Krishna here doesn't mean Lord Krishna. This Krishna is the Sanskrit word. Krishna means dark. Shukla means bright. So this particular Shanti Mantra belongs to Shukla Yajurveda. And each Veda has a particular Shanti Mantra. And therefore you will find that the Upanishads belonging to any particular Veda will have all the Upanishads belonging to one Veda will have the same Shanti Mantra, because the Shanti Mantra is common to the Veda. Now this is one of those, Shanti Mantras where the meaning is rather obtuse. And while we use this Shanti Mantra we use for closing the class, right? We always chant this when we close the class. But remember, Shukla Yajurveda, it's a Shanti Mantra. And Shanti Mantra will be used for opening the class, starting the class. Now this asks for protection against three obstacles. Adi Daivam. There are three obstacles for everybody. Adi Daivam, Adi Bhutam, and Adhyatma. So Adi Daivam means obstacles coming from the Devas. How do we understand it in practical terms? Obstacles over which we have no control. Like for example, an accident, or heavy rains, or floods. You are going to class, the light goes off, the Wi-Fi drops. All this is Adi Daivam. You have no control over that. Then there is Adi Bhutam. Adi Bhutam means from the people, from other people, other beings. Bhutam means beings. So Adi Bhutam means other beings, originating from other beings. Who are they? Could be anybody. Now, if somebody is in your class, is behind you and somebody is yelling, where is my chai? That is obstacle from Adi Bhutam. If somebody is not letting you sit in the class and is coming in constantly bothering, ye chahiye, wo chahiye, Adi Bhutam. So Adi Daivam, things beyond your control. obstacles beyond your control. Adibhutam, obstacles from other people around you. Adhyatmam, obstacles from your own self. How your mind is not focused, you are not able to get up in time for class, you are not able to sit properly because the legs are paining, body is paining, you got fever. Adhyatmam. Okay, so three types of obstacles: Adidaivam, Adibhutam, and Adhyatmam. And this is the reason why we chant three Shantis. The first Shanti is for Adi Daivam. So first Shanti means, oh Lord, please temporarily at least for the period of this class, please ensure that there is no, obstacle from the Devas. There are no obstacles over which I have no control. So Wi-Fi doesn't go off, electricity doesn't go off, earthquakes don't happen. Please ensure that. That is the first Shanti. The second Shanti is for the Adibhutam. Please ensure that my husband or wife doesn't come in and go putter putter while I'm doing class. Okay, so that is second one. Adhyatmam. Please ensure that my body and mind are in fit condition to receive the teaching. Three Shantis. And therefore, you say three Shantis after Purnamada. And normally, the first Shanti is loud. The second Shanti is slightly less loud. The third Shanti is even less. Can you guess the reason why?
Distance.
Distance. Devas are far away. Other people around you. And last one is for yourself, so you can even murmur it to yourself. And there is a pronunciation of the Shantis. I have seen majority of people pronouncing Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. That is not the correct way. Remember that there is a chanting rule. I don't know if you guys have gone to the chanting class. There's a chanting rule class which is occasionally taken up by Tanmay and Shivani. That chanting rule class is important. Whenever it comes, I would urge you to attend it because it tells you how to chant. So here, when you are chanting, if the Visarga is followed by certain letters, that Visarga's pronunciation becomes the half letter. So here what happens is Shanti is followed by Shanti only, right? So Visarga is followed by Sha. And therefore the Visarga has to be pronounced Sha. And because, as I said, it is Shanti, the last syllable is E, the Visarga has to pronounce E. And therefore Shanti, the Visarga turns into a Sha because the next is Sha. So Shantish, Shantish. And the last one, there is no letter following. So it takes the full form of the Visarga, Shanti. Is that clear? Any questions on that? How Shanti is pronounced? Shantish, Shantish, Shanti.
Acharya, I didn't get the last one. We should say properly Shanti.
Shanti. Because the Visarga is there, so Shanti. The Visarga always takes the pronunciation of the previous syllable. In the previous syllable in Shanti is Shanti, E, and therefore Shanti. To say Shanti is wrong. It has to be Shanti.
Acharya ji, please pronounce once more.
Shanti. Shantish, Shantish, Shanti.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, now look at the words. So the word says Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udhyachyate. Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Avashishyate. So that Eva is broken. Purnam Eva Avashishyate. This is what is the exact mantra. And the translation will make, literal translation makes no sense. Om Purnam Adaha. So Adaha means that. Om Purnam Adaha. That is full. Purnam Idam. This is full. Idam is this. This is full. Purnat, Purnam, Udachyate. From that full, this full has come, has originated. Then Purnasya, from that full, Purnam Adaya, when this full is taken away, Purnam Eva Vasishyate. What is remaining will still be Purnam. Does it make any sense? It will leave you completely confused. Right. So, this first line, Om Purnam Adaha Purnam Idam, it talks about the relationship between Jivatma and Paramatma. And it says there are two relationships. So here, I mean, I know this is the beginning of the Gita class, but that is why normally we don't say this. But since it was asked, I'm explaining. And some of you may understand, some of you may not understand. So before beginning, there is something called Vachyartha and Lakshyartha. Do you know what it means?
Word meaning and the
Literal meaning and intended meaning.
Literal meaning and intended meaning. Okay. So this line has to be interpreted in both ways, Vachyartha and Lakshyartha. So one relationship between that and this. So the two things here are that and this, Adaha and Idam. That is what we're talking about. And both are Purnam. So the one relationship between that and this is Karana Karya Sambandha. Creator created relationship. The cause effect relationship. Okay. Which is called the Vachyartha meaning, the word meaning. The other one is the Aikya Sambandha. This is the Lakshyartha, which is the identification, the oneness between the two, between that and this. The oneness is there. Okay. So this is called Lakshyartha meaning. Now, the Vachyartha meaning has to be taken as from the viewpoint of Saguna with form. And the Lakshyartha meaning has to be taken as from the point of without form, Nirguna. This is the technical meaning. Technical meaning which would have been understood perfectly had you spent 2-3 years in the Gita. But you have not, right? So let's try to make it simpler. You take the example of the wave and the ocean. The wave is born from the ocean, is sustained by the ocean, and resolved or goes back into the ocean. So when you say wave and ocean, the word meaning is the Vachyartha Drishti. The word meaning is that the wave is born from the ocean. The wave is maintained in the ocean only, and when the wave dies, it goes back into the ocean. So this is the creator created sambandha. Who is the creator and who is the created here?
Ocean is the creator and wave is the created.
Okay, so there is a karana karya sambandha. Creator created connection. This is called Vachyartha Drishti. The meaning from the literal word meaning. Okay. Now, supposing we ignore the name and the form, which is the Upadhi. Okay. Name and form is called Upadhi. Supposing we ignore name and form, what is wave essentially?
water,
What is ocean essentially?
water.
And therefore, if you ignore the name and the form, then there is a relationship of oneness, if you can call it a relationship of oneness between the wave and the water. Aikyam is there. The wave is no different from the water. This is the implied meaning, the Lakshyartha Drishti. So ocean is water, Lakshyartha Drishti, which means without the form, Nirupadika Drishtiya. Without the form, the ocean is nothing but water. But if the form is there, which is Saupadika, with the form, then ocean is creator, water is created. Have you understood?
Yeah.
Anybody who has not understood? Okay, with this background, look at the mantra. So it says Purnam Adaha. So here, this Purnam refers to Paramatma. That Paramatma is infinite. Purnam Idam. Here
Never
is
find
who?
self, Jivatma.
Jivatma. So Purnam Adaha. That Paramatma is infinite. Purnam Idam. This Jivatma is also infinite. This is Lakshyartha Drishti. Why? Because the Upadhi has been not taken into account. What is the Upadhi? The three bodies of Jivatma is Upadhi. The universe is the Upadhi of Paramatma. So having dropped the Upadhis, Purnamadam, Purnamidam. Paramatma is the same as Jivatma. Both are infinite. This is the meaning of Tattvamasi, the Mahavakya. Okay. Now look at the second. Purnat Purnam Udachyate. From that infinite Paramatma, the infinite Jivatma is born. When you say that, there is a grammatical problem. If both are infinite, how can you say one infinite is born from another infinite? And therefore, in this line, you can't take Lakshyartha. It has to be Vachyartha alone. If you take Vachyartha, then you are taking the forms. So you are taking from that Saguna Ishvara, this Saguna Jiva is born. Here there is a Karana Karya Sambandha. Creator, created, meaning is there. Okay. So the first quarter of the verse and the second quarter of the verse, they give the meaning from two different points, Lakshyartha and Vachyartha. So one is creator created, one is identification, identity between the two. Then look at Purnasya Purnamadaya. When you separate the Jivatma, somebody is talking, please. Please do not talk, or at least mute yourself. It makes it difficult for the others. So Purnasya Purnam Adaya. When you separate Ishvara from Jiva, how to separate? Normally when you say, supposing I take away Jivatma, I take away Atma from Jiva, what is going to be left out?
Jeev, bodies only.
That is what is meant. When you take away the Atma from Jivatma, then Jiva is left. That is the normal meaning. Right? But look at it from the water wave example. When you remove the water from the wave, what is left?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Ocean.
Ocean.
You have to say what is left behind.
Nothing.
When you remove the
Water.
water from the wave,
Only water is left, no?
only water is left.
Constant.
You cannot say nothing. When you remove water from wave, water is still there, no? When you remove water from ocean, what is left behind? Still water will be left
Water.
behind. So don't say nothing. That's a mistake. Right? This is what he means. Purnam eva avishishate. So he's saying here that when you remove the Purna Swarupam of Ishvara, the real essence of Ishvara, which is what? Atma. From the Purna Swarupam of Jiva, which is what? Atma. Normally, when you say, I am removing Atma from Jivatma, you will say Anatma is left. Because Jivatma is, Atma is equal to Anatma. The normal meaning given is that if I remove the Atma from Jivatma, Jivatma consists of Atma and Anatma. And therefore Anatma is left. That is the normal logical meaning that is given. That is why I gave the example of the water in the wave. You can give another example, gold and necklace. When you remove the gold from the necklace, what is left?
Gold.
Gold alone.
Gold is left.
So that's what he says. Purnam eva avashishyate. That Atma only is left behind. If you remove Atma from Anatma, from Jiva, Anatma doesn't remain. Only Atma remains. If you remove Atma from Paramatma, Param doesn't remain. Only Atma remains. Just like in the gold and the chain. Why is that? Because Anatma cannot have an existence separate from Atma. Just like the necklace cannot exist separate from the gold. Hence, when Anatma is separated, or Atma is separated from Anatma, the Nama Rupam, the name and form, have been negated, because without Atma, there is no name and form. The necklace, remember, is only name and form. And when gold is gone, the name and form do not remain. Similarly, when Atma is gone, what remains is only Atma. Name and form do not exist without Atma. So combining both these pieces of the mantra, the real meaning is Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha. Any questions?
Acharya, I didn't get that how water remains if we take out the water.
What do you take out the water? You've taken out a bucket and taken out the water, right? But the water still remains in the bucket, no? It has not gone away.
Oh, like that. Okay. Okay.
What I'm saying is, if you take out water from a wave, you put the wave into the water, into the bucket, what remains is only the water.
It changes the name that was given to its original
Only
shape.
the form has changed, the name has changed, nothing else has changed.
Nothing else has changed.
Yes, Acharya. Thank you.
Ravi sir, why do
So
we?
Purnam, the
Uh,
last part of the verse, the Purnameva Vashishyate.
Purnam, avashishyate means remains. So
Oh.
Purnam eva avashishyate. The Purnam here is the Atma. Atma only remains.
Okay, like it, why water still remains. Thank you.
Now you know why it was difficult to explain.
Yeah, but it's got such a deep meaning. Only a guru can explain
The
this.
thing is that this is to be understood only after understanding a lot of the Gita. So anyway, because you asked, I explained. There's one more point I want to discuss before we start the classes of the Bhagavad Gita and the next class. Next Sunday we'll start the Gita. So there is something called Pramanam. Now what is Pramanam, do you know?
Proof of existence or validation?
No.
Source of knowledge.
Pramanam
Source
is
of
a
knowledge.
source of knowledge. Now all of us have got Pramanam. What are they?
The
Vedas.
Shastras.
Our indriyas
Your
are
Indriyas. Why are Indriyas Pramanam?
because we get knowledge from there.
Exactly. So you look at something through your eyes and you see the color and the form. So it's a Pramanam. You hear some sound, you get what that sound means. Pramanam. You taste, you smell, you touch. All these are Pramanam. Okay, Shabda, Sparsha, Rasa, Gandha. All these are Pramanams. Your nose, your eyes, these are Pramanams. So Pramanam is essentially a means of knowledge. Okay. Now Vedanta says that there are 6 different types of Pramanam. So I won't go into the details right now, but very briefly, Pratyaksha Pramanam is perception, which includes all your Indriyas. So when somebody says Pratyaksha Pramanam, it means the five Indriyas. Then there is Anumanam. Anumanam is also a Pramanam. Anumanam is an inference based on something that you have seen or heard. Then there is Upamanam, a comparison.
Comparison.
Then there is a Arthapatti, which is a postulation. You have made an assumption. Then there is something called anupalabdhi.
Anupalabdhi.
This is a peculiar one. It is how you know that something doesn't exist. So anupalabdhi. Upalabdhi means existing. Anupalabdhi means non-existing. Then the last one is Shabda Pramanam
Shastra.
or Shastra. Okay, so these are your pramanams which Vedanta says.
Repeat the sixth one, Acharya.
Could you please repeat them all for us?
Pratyaksha Pramanam, Anumana Pramanam,
Anam.
Upamana Pramanam, Arthapatti, Anupalabdhi, Shabda or Shastra Pramanam. Shabda Pramanam is another name for Shastra Pramanam. Okay, now the most important part. What makes something a pramanam? Under what condition can you call a source of knowledge as pramanam? So the first condition is the pramanam must have a subject matter of its own. Which means what? That subject matter is unique to that pramanam. You can understand? What is the subject matter of the eyes?
Vision.
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 No, you have to be more specific.
Light.
Form
See.
and color. You don't see light. You see the form and the color of an object. So the Vishaya of the Aksha Vishaya, the subject matter of your Aksha Pramanam, your eye Pramanam, is form and color. What is the subject matter of your Karna Pramanam, of your ears?
Sound.
Sound.
What is subject matter of your nose?
Smell.
Gandha.
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 Correct, you're getting it. What is subject matter of the tongue?
Taste.
Rasa.
And subject matter of the skin?
Touch.
Sparsha.
Harsha.
Okay.
Sparsh.
So those who have done Tattva Bodha, for them this is very clear. Those who have not done Tattva Bodha, I would urge you, please join the next Tattva Bodha class. Otherwise, you will continue to have these doubts throughout the Gita. Tattva Bodha is very, very essential, and not just once, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. As many times as you can do, you must do, until the concepts are crystal clear. Okay. So the first condition that a pramanam fulfills it has a subject matter of its own. The second condition is that the scope of one pramanam must not be covered by any other
By
pramanam.
this. It's unique.
By any other pramanam. So your eyes have form and color. That form and color cannot be perceived by your ears or by your nose or by your skin or by your tongue. So it is unique. And arising out of this, the pramanam must be abhaditattvam, which means that pramanam should not be able to be contradicted by any other pramanam. So if your eyes tell you that something is red, no other pramanam will be able to give you a contra indication saying it is not red. And the fourth one is it must convey some definite knowledge.
Right.
There should be no ambiguity. It cannot be, is it blue or is it yellow or is it red? Okay. And the fifth one and the last one is that it must generate some knowledge. Knowledge should be generated, and that knowledge should be definite knowledge, free of any ambiguity. These 5 things are the conditions that a pramanam must fulfill. Okay. Now look at the Shabda Pramanam, which is your Veda or Bhagavad Gita. What is the subject matter of this pramanam? Does the Veda or Bhagavad Gita have a particular unique subject matter?
Self.
Jnanam.
Self knowledge.
Subject matter is Atma. Atma or Brahman. Okay. Now, this knowledge coming from Atman or coming from Veda, Atma or Brahman knowledge, can it be given by any other pramanam?
No.
No. And therefore, can you use science to validate Veda?
Technically, no.
Not technically, literally also you cannot use. Because what is the subject matter of science?
Something that is visible, or like so that can
Subject
be
matter of science is the
Anatma.
external
Anatma.
world.
anatma.
External.
Anatma. In terms of what we learn, subject matter of science is anatma. Subject matter of Veda is atma. Huge difference. Right? Now, therefore, science cannot contradict Veda. Because the subject matter, the Vishaya, Atma, is not available to science for study. Science takes its analysis from data provided by the universe, by the world. When you study Veda, where does the data come from? It comes from the Veda itself. When you analyze the Veda, you have to take the data from Veda. When you analyze using science, you have to use the data coming from external world. Therefore, science cannot contradict Veda. The reverse is also true. Science cannot prove.
Cannot validate also.
Cannot validate also. Neither contradiction nor validation is possible by science. And therefore, the most common thing which a lot of youngsters try,
Stop it.
trying to validate Veda using science, it is meaningless. Therefore, never try to validate your Veda or prove it or disprove it using science. It can never be done. The two subject matters are completely different. Then there should be no ambiguity. It should generate some definite knowledge. So Veda generates definite knowledge about Atma and about things called Swarga and all those things, none of which are available to your other Pramanam. And it gives you definite knowledge. It gives you this is Atma, very specifically what this Atma it says. So definite knowledge without ambiguity it does. This is the difference between Veda and science as Pramanam. Science is also Pramanam, but science is Pramanam as far as Anatma is concerned. Veda is Pramanam as far as Atma is concerned. Okay, now the question is, when you use your eyes to see something and you say, okay, this is a mobile phone. You don't question that, right? Your eyes have shown you a mobile phone. So in terms of what we are saying, the analysis, the data given by your eyes to you is that this is a mobile phone. The data which is given by your eyes, by that Pramanam, is this object in front of me is a mobile phone. Is that data subject to question by your intellect?
No.
Why not?
Because we believe that it's mobile.
Because
We
we've
know
connected
it's
it to
mobile.
previous knowledge.
So, point is that you have Shraddha in your eyes.
Believe, yeah, I think.
You have faith in your eyes. You have faith that what is shown to me by my eyes cannot be untrue. Right? Now, Veda is called another Pramana. And therefore, all these conditions, including Shraddha, has to be there for Pramanam to work on you. If, for example, you are doubting your eyes all the time, you won't be able to walk at all. Right? You won't be able to do anything in the world if you doubt your five senses. You are able to function because you are not doubting your five senses. Similarly, if you want this Pramanam of Veda to work on you, that faith has got to be there. That what Veda tells me is true.
Is correct.
Right? You can use science to contradict if you can.
It's very annoying.
If you can contradict what Veda has shown you, what statement Veda has made, by all means, you must use that science which you have to contradict. Let me give you an example. Scripture says that if you do sufficient good actions, you get punyam. And that punyam can take you to heaven. use your science to contradict that. Can it?
No.
Because the subject matter is not available. That is why I said unique subject matter. But supposing, now there are some statements in the Veda which says that if this person is innocent and he picks up a hot iron rod, then his hand won't get burnt. Right? Can that be contradicted?
Yes.
It can, providing you know that the person is innocent. And yet, the iron rod will burn. So there are these kind of statements also. So these statements are a peculiar type of statements used for emphasis. So we don't take them as these statements which we need never question. So essentially we say that the statements of the Veda, if you cannot contradict using logic, using experience, then you have to accept them as true. That is Shraddha. Shraddha is not blind faith. If Veda says something and you cannot contradict that statement using logic and using your own experience, Anubhav also. If your Anubhav is not in contradiction to what is being said, and if logic also cannot contradict, then faith is accepting that it is true. Does it make sense? It's a very, very important thing to start from. So, and we encourage you to use your logic and use your own experience to question every statement. So, unlike other, religious texts, we never say don't question. We say question all the time. But use logic and use your own experience. If these two fail, then there is nothing to, disprove that statement. And therefore you say, since it is pramanam, I accept it. It's a very fine line. Do you see? If you cannot disprove something, you accept. While most scientists, what do they say? If you cannot prove something, it doesn't exist. That is what I'm trying to tell you, you should guard against. Remember that, absence of proof is not equal to proof of
Present.
absence. That is Shraddha. You may not be able to prove that Swarga exists. That is absence of proof. Right?
Is that what Anuplabdhi is about?
No. Anuplabdhi is something else. That we are not entering into the Pramanam at this stage. We'll discuss this in much more detail when the time comes. Here I'm simply trying to say how you should approach Bhagavad Gita, which is a Pramana. You can look at each statement very critically, use logic to disprove it, use your own experience to disprove it. And if you cannot do that, then you have to say that, yes, I accept the statement is true. When that frame of mind comes, that is called Shraddha in the Pramana. And Krishna says, Shraddhavan labhate jnanam. The one who has Shraddha, only he can get knowledge.
Acharya ji, your last sentence, please. Absence of proof.
Absence of proof is never equal to proof of absence. That is the same word, just put upside down. But most scientists, most atheists, they will take absence of proof as equal to proof of absence, which is not true at all. It is logically incorrect. Absence of proof is simply absence of proof. It means you have not been able to find the proof.
Om Raviji, I just have a question about when we were speaking about the, about the 5 points around the Vedas, and we said that the Veda itself generates new knowledge. The new knowledge comes from Vedas itself. can you please elaborate? I have a vague I mean, it's not very, very clear. Are we
Yeah.
talking about personal knowledge?
No,
Or
no,
what,
no,
what?
no. I'm talking about knowledge about the Atma. Without the Veda, no source of knowledge can tell you what is Atma or tell you that you are the Atma. That knowledge that you are the Atma only Veda gives. And that is fresh knowledge generated only by Veda. That knowledge is not available anywhere else. That is what I meant by saying that Veda generates knowledge. And it is non-ambiguous knowledge. It is definite knowledge that yes, I am Atma. Definite knowledge when you have completely understood and assimilated.
Thank you.
Okay, so with this, we'll stop for today. Thank you for your patience. And from the next class onwards, we'll actually enter the Bhagavad Gita. Om Purnamada
Namidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate
Om
Shanti,
Shanti. Om Tat Sat.
Om
Namah Shivaya. Have a
Thank
great
you,
weekend,
Ravi.
guys.
Thank you,
Thank
Acharya.
you.